Chapter 35 in one word is lasoise, to do. The emphasis on doing mitzvahs in the physical world. And the fact that we're engaged in things of the physical nature in this world of it. We had a Zohar yesterday that the Anuka made a comment that that the divine presence of God, the light of God, is overhead of the person. Therefore, don't go for 4 cubits without your head covered. And make sure that you're always giving fuel to create that light. Oil is the fuel that creates the light. That oil is good deeds. And it goes through the wick that brings about the light of God, the presence of God, the Shekhinah, as we call it in Talmudic terms, above the individual. And those good deeds are mitzvahs, God's commands. That was the metaphor. So the Alter Rebbe starts to unpack this metaphor, this analogy. Now, how do you create a light? You have a wick. The wick isn't sufficient because you could light a wick and it could create a light, but it will quickly go out and it'll also be a smoky light. It won't be a clean light. So what you need is oil. You need something, oil that is able to go through the wick to create that light. Now, what is the oil? We said it's good deeds, but the Alter Rebbe explains why, in fact, is it the good deeds, the mitzvahs that we do, as opposed to my very soul. My very soul is bound up with God. Why shouldn't that create the light of God? I have the light of God in me. So if I reveal that light of God through the love and awe of God, why isn't that enough for the light of God to be surrounding me? As in the metaphor, the candle. Right? Why shouldn't that be enough? Good question. Especially a righteous person. You know, me, or some of us perhaps, or if not all of us, you know, perhaps our love of God is not, not that of the righteous at least. But the righteous, they really love God. They really reveal their soul. So why wouldn't that be enough to create the light of God? So the Alter Rebbe explains this interesting idea. Even though that the soul is indeed a part of God, but once it's in a body, and it's not just in the body, separate from the body, but it's invested in the body, so the body kind of gives it a dimension of creation to it, because the body itself is a creation of God, as opposed to the soul as a part of God. There's a difference between creation. That's the word of God that creates something. Part of God comes from his inner being. Yet, because it's now part of the body or invested within the body, it becomes a created divine being. And therefore there's a certain separateness that even the righteous person who loves God in a consummate way there is still a separateness of the person with God. Because it is Yesh Mishayev, it is the righteous who's loving. They're loving. Wonderful, they're loving, and their consummate love is amazing, but it's still, there's still a me there that's loving. Right? Because, well, love suggests that there is the person who's the one who's engaged in loving. So there is a sense of separateness. There's me and the beloved. I love the beloved. So there's a separateness. Not so when you do a mitzvah. A mitzvah is the internal will of God. It has no other identity. The tzaddik has an identity. Selfhood of the tzaddik, even though completely nullified and so on, but there's still a sense of self. And therefore the love itself cannot be the fuel that will create the light of God. It has to be something that is completely one and bound up with God, and that's only God's will, his inner will. There's an outer will that's a means to an end, and an inner will, which is an end in itself. So God creates a world, which is an outer will, through his speech. But the mitzvah is a part of him. That's his inner desire. That's really what he wants. God isn't looking to just create a physical world for the sake of the physical world, but he wants that his inner desire, that in a physical world, we will do his command. He will do his will. That will is one with him. When we do the will, we're bound up in one with him. And therefore, we need good deeds. We need the mitzvahs in order to fulfill that. Now, so that's the combustion. That's the fuel. Not the combustion, the fuel, rather. That creates the flame, the light over my head and your head when you're studying Torah right now. When we do a mitzvah, what's the wick? The wick is the body. And the animal soul that animates the body. It's the conduit for the mitzvah. Simply put, the body is how you can do the mitzvah, right? You can only give charity by taking a physical hand and reaching out. You can't do charity by thinking it. You can only put on your tefillin by physically wrapping the strap around your arm. You can only light Shabbos candles by physically doing the act. And so it's the body is the conduit for the mitzvah. That's the fuel that creates a light of God that embraces the individual. Short class today. And that mitzvah is in a perfect unity with God. That's not hidden at all, meaning it has no other identity. You know, when you look at the tefillin, you don't see, oh, there's spirituality and also God. No, it's only godliness. It's only mitzvah. Its identity is totally mitzvah of God. You look at the righteous person, you could say, oh, there's a very spiritual person. Right? There's a very lofty person. You see, you've got an identity. You got a self.